My dear friends, I want to speak to your heart today. You may be walking through a season of silence. You've prayed, you've cried, and still there's no answer. You look around and nothing seems to be changing. You wonder, God, are you even listening? Let me tell you something. Just because you can't see God working doesn't mean he's not working. Behind the curtain of your life, God is orchestrating something bigger than you could ever imagine. You may be facing delay, but God is never late. He works outside of time. He's setting things in motion that you can't even comprehend. You see, when Joseph was thrown into a pit by his brothers, it looked like the end. But God was working behind the scenes, using that very moment to take Joseph from the pit to the palace. When Moses stood before the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army behind him, it looked like defeat. But God had a plan. The sea wasn't an obstacle, it was a pathway. God split it wide open. Friend, what looks like a setback in your life may be a setup for a miracle. You may not understand the pain. You may not see the purpose. But God never wastes pain. He turns ashes into beauty. He turns brokenness into strength. So don't give up when you don't see progress. Don't quit when the answer is delayed. Heaven is not silent. God is working behind the scenes. He's aligning hearts. He's softening enemies. He's preparing opportunities. He's making a way where there seems to be no way. Stay faithful. Keep praying. Keep walking, because one day what's been hidden will be revealed. And you'll see that every silent night, every tear, every unanswered prayer was leading you to exactly where you needed to be. God is working even when you don't see it, even when you don't feel it. He is always faithful, always good, always on time. God works silently and powerfully behind the scenes, even when we can't see or feel it. There are moments in life when everything seems still, when prayers appear to go unanswered, doors remain closed, and the heavens feel silent. In those times, we may begin to wonder if God has forgotten us, if our faith is in vain, or if our cries are being ignored. But the truth is, silence does not mean absence. In fact, some of God's greatest work happens in silence. Just as a seed grows in the soil without a sound, so too does God move in unseen, unheard ways to bring about his perfect plan in our lives. We often look for signs, immediate answers, or some visible evidence that change is coming. But God isn't limited by what we see or understand. His ways are higher than ours. His timing is perfect, and his methods are often beyond our comprehension. In the stillness, God is weaving together details we could never arrange on our own. He is positioning people, opening hearts, preparing circumstances, all in a divine rhythm that often only makes sense when we look back. Think of the stars. During the day, they're still there, but we can't see them. The light of the sun hides them from our sight, but their presence is unchanged. Likewise, God is always present, always active, even when we can't perceive him. His hand is never still, his heart never far. He is working in the background, in the waiting, in the delays, and even in what we may call disappointments. Sometimes God removes people from our lives and we feel hurt or abandoned. Yet what we don't realize is that he is making space for something better. Sometimes a job doesn't come through, or a plan falls apart, and we question why. But what if God is redirecting us from something that would harm us, or that would keep us from our true calling? These are not random events. They are divine interventions. God's silence is not indifference. It's a sacred stillness that prepares us for his best. When Lazarus died and Jesus delayed coming to him, it seemed like the miracle was missed, but Jesus had a bigger plan to not just heal a sick man, but to raise a dead one. The delay wasn't a denial, it was a setup for a greater glory. And that same God is working in your story. You may not understand the reason for the delay, the silence, or the struggle, but God is not idle. He's building your strength. increasing your faith, and clearing the path ahead. Faith means trusting God when the path is unclear, when the answers are delayed, and when the silence is deafening. It's in those moments that our trust is tested and our roots grow deep. And while the world may judge progress by what is seen, God builds greatness in the unseen. So even when it seems like nothing is happening, when your prayers feel like whispers in the wind, know this: God is moving quietly, faithfully, powerfully. He's behind the scenes, writing your story with grace, mercy, and unmatched love. Delays are not denials. God's timing is perfect and purposeful. In our fast-paced world, we've been conditioned to expect instant results. We want quick answers, fast progress, and immediate breakthroughs. When things don't happen on our timeline, frustration begins to rise. We start to question God's promises, doubt his plans, and wonder if he has forgotten us. But God is never in a hurry, and he's never late. He operates on a timeline that is eternal, not earthly. What seems like a delay to us is often divine preparation in disguise. God's timing is rooted in wisdom and love. He sees the full picture. We only see a single frame. Sometimes we ask for things we're not yet ready to receive. We may desire a certain blessing, but God knows that if he gave it to us too soon, it could become a burden instead. The waiting isn't meant to break us, it's meant to build us. In the delay, God shapes our character, deepens our trust, and stretches our faith. He refines us in the waiting so we'll be strong enough to carry what he's prepared for us. There are countless examples in Scripture where delay was part of the divine process. Abraham waited decades for the child God had promised. David was anointed king as a young man, but didn't sit on the throne until years later after running for his life. Even Jesus waited 30 years before beginning his public ministry. In each of these cases, the waiting wasn't wasted. It was necessary. It was part of the process God used to prepare them for the purpose he had planned. When we view delays through a spiritual lens, we begin to understand that they are not setbacks, but setups. God is not withholding good things from us out of cruelty. He is protecting us and preparing the best outcome. Sometimes what feels like a no is actually a not yet. Sometimes the door that didn't open wasn't the right one, and in his mercy, God kept us from walking through it. Other times the answer is on the way, but things in the background need to shift first. Hearts need to change, circumstances need to align, and we need to grow into the people God has called us to be. It's in the waiting that we learn patience. It's in the delay that we learn to surrender our timeline to God's will. That surrender doesn't mean giving up hope. It means placing our hope in the one who knows all things and works all things together for good. When we trust God's timing, we no longer see delays as obstacles, but as part of his loving design. Each day of waiting becomes a step closer to the fulfillment of his promise. We must remember that the God who made time is not limited. His delay is not a denial. It is a declaration that his ways are higher, his thoughts deeper, and his love greater than we can comprehend. When the answer comes, it will be right, it will be good, and it will be exactly when it's meant to arrive. Biblical examples like Joseph and Moses show that what looks like defeat is often preparation for victory. Their stories are not just historical accounts. They are divine blueprints of how God takes what seems like failure, loss, or abandonment and transforms it into triumph. When we examine their journeys, we realize that God doesn't waste a single moment, not even the painful ones. He uses every struggle, every betrayal, every setback as a stepping stone toward a greater purpose. Joseph's life began with favor. He was the beloved son of Jacob and was given a dream by God that one day he would be a ruler. But almost immediately after receiving the vision, Joseph's life took a sharp turn. His own brothers, consumed by jealousy, threw him into a pit and sold him into slavery. From a favored son, he became a servant in a foreign land. Then, just as things seemed to stabilize in Potiphar's house, false accusations landed him in prison. For years, Joseph lived in rejection, obscurity, and confinement. To the human eye, it looked like complete defeat, but behind the scenes, God was at work. Each season in Joseph's life was preparing him for the palace. In the pit, he learned humility. In Potiphar's house, he learned responsibility. In prison, he learned leadership, patience, and dependence on God. All the while, God was shaping him for the moment when he would be called to interpret Pharaoh's dream, an act that would make him the second most powerful man in Egypt. The same Joseph who was betrayed and forgotten became the one who would save nations from famine. His defeat was not the end, it was the training ground for destiny. Moses' story follows a similar pattern. Born under a death sentence, placed in a basket to escape Pharaoh's command, and raised in the very palace that sought his destruction, Moses seemed destined for greatness. But after killing an Egyptian in a moment of anger, he fled into the wilderness and spent 40 years in exile as a shepherd. From prince to fugitive, Moses' life appeared to be a wasted one. Yet it was in the solitude of the desert that God prepared him to become the deliverer of Israel. The burning bush encounter didn't happen in the palace, it happened in the wilderness. The voice of God didn't thunder in the courts of Egypt, but in the quiet fields where Moses tended sheep. What looked like a downfall was in fact God's way of stripping Moses of pride and self-reliance so he could be used as a humble servant to confront Pharaoh and lead God's people to freedom. Both Joseph and Moses experienced seasons that looked like total defeat, yet those very moments became the foundation for their victories. God allowed them to go low so he could raise them high. Their stories are reminders that no pain is pointless, no delay is wasted, and no setback is final when God is in control. What the world calls defeat, God calls preparation. And in his perfect timing, he turns every trial into triumph. Pain has purpose. God never wastes your suffering. He transforms it into something greater. In the midst of our deepest hurts, it can be hard to believe that any good can come from the pain. We often cry out with questions, why this, why now, why me? But the truth is, while pain may feel like the end of something, in God's hands, it is often the beginning of something new. He is a redeemer, a restorer, and a master of turning broken pieces into something beautiful. Pain teaches us in ways that comfort never can. When life is easy, we rarely stop to grow, but in hardship, we are stretched, refined, and drawn closer to the heart of God. In suffering, we realize our need for him more deeply. We let go of pride, self-dependence, and illusions of control. In that vulnerable place, God meets us, not to destroy, but to rebuild with greater strength. He is near to the brokenhearted and saves those crushed in spirit. That nearness is often felt most clearly in the valley, not on the mountaintop. Consider the story of Job. He lost everything, his children, his wealth, his health. His friends misunderstood him, and his heart cried out in agony. Yet through it all, Job held on to his faith. He questioned, he mourned, but he never walked away from God. And when the trial was over, God restored to him double what was lost. But more than material blessings, Job gained something greater, a deeper understanding of who God is. In the end, Job said, "My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you." Pain had opened his eyes to a more intimate relationship with the Almighty. The Apostle Paul also understood this truth. He endured shipwrecks, beatings, imprisonment, and constant danger. He even spoke of a thorn in the flesh, some form of suffering, that he asked God to remove. But God said, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul learned that pain didn't mean abandonment. It meant that God's power could shine even brighter through his weakness. His suffering became the very platform for God's glory to be revealed. Even Jesus, the Son of God, experienced pain. The cross was the ultimate picture of suffering, betrayal, mockery, physical agony, and separation. But through that pain came the greatest victory the world has ever known. The pain of the cross brought the hope of salvation. What looked like defeat was the doorway to redemption. God does not waste a tear. He sees the silent cries, the sleepless nights, and the moments no one else notices. And in his time, he brings beauty from ashes. He uses our wounds to heal others. He uses our struggles to inspire, our loss to teach, and our brokenness to shine his light. Pain is never pleasant, but in the hands of a loving God, it is never pointless. He weaves our suffering into a story of hope, resilience, and transformation. What once felt like ruin becomes a testimony of restoration. And through it all, we come to know that our pain has a divine purpose, because God is always working, always healing, and always transforming our trials into triumphs. Faithfulness during silence is crucial. Keep praying, trusting, and moving forward. There are times in life when it feels as though heaven has gone quiet. We pray with all our heart, yet the only response is silence. We seek God, but we don't feel him near. We knock on doors that never open and wait for answers that don't seem to come. It's in these seasons of silence that our faith is truly tested. Do we keep walking when we can't see the path? Do we keep praying when it feels like no one is listening? This is where real faith is born, not in the moments of clarity, but in the moments of quiet. God often works in the silence. Just because we don't hear him doesn't mean he isn't speaking through our circumstances. Just because we don't feel his presence doesn't mean he's not walking beside us. Faithfulness in silence is about continuing to pursue God even when the emotions have faded, when the goosebumps are gone, and when the answers are delayed. It's easy to trust when everything is going right, but true faith is proven when everything feels wrong and we still choose to believe. The story of Noah reminds us of the power of persistent faith. God gave him a word to build an ark, but then years passed with no rain. Imagine building something so massive day after day while people mocked and doubted you and nothing in the sky changed. Yet Noah kept working, kept trusting, and stayed faithful. The silence wasn't God's absence, it was his timing. And in due season, the rain came, and the ark became the vessel of salvation. In the New Testament, we see the same theme in the life of the woman with the issue of blood. For 12 years she suffered, 12 years of waiting, praying, hoping, and likely facing disappointment after disappointment. But she didn't give up. The silence didn't stop her. When she heard that Jesus was near, she pushed through the crowd with nothing but faith in her heart and touched the edge of his garment. In that moment, her persistence met God's power, and she was healed. Faithfulness is not about pretending to have all the answers. It's about continuing to walk with God even when you don't. It's choosing to pray even when the words feel weak. It's opening your Bible when your heart feels dry. It's waking up each day and saying, Lord, I trust you even when you don't understand what he's doing. This kind of faith is powerful. It's the faith that moves mountains, not because the mountains are small, but because the God behind our faith is great. Sometimes silence is the greatest tool God uses to deepen our trust. In that silence, he's teaching us to rely on his promises rather than our feelings. He's anchoring us not in emotions, but in truth. And the truth is, he is faithful even when we can't hear him. He is present even when we can't feel him. And he is working even when we can't see the evidence. Faithfulness during silence builds endurance. It teaches us that trust is not based on sight, but on surrender. And when the silence finally breaks and the answer comes, we'll see that every step of obedience, every whispered prayer, every tear cried in faith was not wasted. It was shaping us, strengthening us, and drawing us closer to the heart of God. One day, what is hidden will be revealed, and you'll understand how it was all part of God's divine plan. Life is full of mystery. We walk through seasons that don't make sense. Doors close unexpectedly. People we love walk away. Opportunities vanish, and pain enters without warning. In those moments, it can feel like we're lost in a story we don't understand, living in a chapter that seems disconnected from any kind of purpose. We wonder why God allowed certain things to happen, why the path is so hard, and why the answers we long for are delayed or denied. But there is a day coming when the puzzle pieces will fit and the picture will finally be clear. God sees the full story from beginning to end. While we are living in a scene, he holds the entire script. What feels like a setback may actually be a setup. What feels like a rejection might be divine protection. We often judge the story too soon, thinking that this page defines the whole book, but God writes with eternity in mind. Nothing is wasted. Not your waiting, not your weeping, not your wondering. Every tear, every trial, every detour serves a purpose that is bigger than what you can see right now. Think of Joseph sitting in a prison cell, falsely accused and forgotten. It must have seemed like the dream God gave him was dead. But behind the scenes, God was preparing a moment that would not only lift Joseph out of prison, but position him to save an entire nation. What was hidden from Joseph in the darkness would later be revealed in the light. Every betrayal, every injustice, every lonely night was part of a divine plan. And when the time was right, God brought it all together in a way only he could. Moses too must have questioned his journey. Raised in a palace, exiled to a desert, called to lead a stubborn people through wilderness for 40 years. There were moments of deep confusion, moments when the promise seemed distant. But God knew exactly what he was doing, and one day on a mountain, Moses stood and looked into the promised land, knowing that every step, every trial, and every silence had a purpose in God's grand design. We don't see everything now because faith is required in the journey. God doesn't always show us the why in the moment because he's asking us to trust him beyond our understanding. But there is coming a day when we will look back and say, now I see. The things that broke us, stretched us, and brought us to our knees will shine with new meaning. What was once confusing will become clear. What was once painful will reveal its purpose. In eternity, we will see the threads of God's hand woven through our lives. We will see how the moments we questioned were actually moments God was closest. We will see how the delays were for our good, the detours were for our growth, and the silence was never empty. One day, everything hidden will be brought to light, not to shame us, but to show us the beauty of a plan far greater than we could have imagined. And on that day, we'll know that every part of the journey was worth it, because God was working all along. Here's a powerful and faith-filled ending you can use for your speech. God is working behind the scenes. So if you find yourself in a season of silence, a place of uncertainty, or walking through a valley where nothing seems to make sense, take heart. God has not forgotten you. He is not absent. He is working behind the scenes, weaving every detail of your life into a masterpiece. What you can't see now, you'll one day understand. Keep trusting, keep praying, keep walking by faith, not by sight. Because the same God who parted the seas, who raised the dead, who made a way in the wilderness, is working in your story too. And when the curtain is finally pulled back, you'll see that he was there all along, faithful, loving, and in complete control.